Hello, everyone. Welcome to the show. I'm very excited to be joined today by Benjamin Kowalski, who is the co-host of Freight 360. How are you doing today, Benjamin?
Doing really well. Pleasure to be here, Andy.
Excellent. I was looking forward to having you on the show with me. We're going to be talking about key trends in freight, along with some news about your podcast and some keys to success in this world of freight. So just to kick things off, I'd like to give a special shout out to our sponsor, True Diligence. If you're looking to streamline your background checks, save some time and money, add some new capabilities with a company that has over 30 years in the business and over 1,100 clients, please be sure and click on that link below. So to give our audience a little background about you, Benjamin, where were you, who were you surrounded with, and what inspired you to start the Freight 360 podcast?
Yeah, so it's kind of a bit of an interesting story. My partner, Nate Cross, who now is over the agent division over at Pierce Worldwide, he actually worked as an agent recruiter years and years ago, better part of 10 years ago. And he actually had tried to recruit me when I was first at a large brokerage to possibly work with him. And it was just one of those scenarios where we really kind of hit it off personality. We really enjoyed each other's kind of company and expertise, but couldn't really find anything back then. I didn't want to leave, but again, it was one of those instances where you're like, this person probably has something worthwhile we'll connect with over the years. And we kept in touch, and years had passed. I had left that brokerage, got into coaching and consulting, and then wanted to get back into our industry. At the time, he had a podcast he'd been doing for about a year or two with another partner called the Midnight Freight Broker. And he had left that organization and had left that partner. And I reached out to him and said, hey, I would love to do something in this podcasting space. What do you think? It seems like you've kind of parted ways with who you'd been working with for, whatever reason. What do you think? And as we kind of got together and kind of brainstormed it, the podcast Freight 360 came out of the Midnight Freight Broker, which then became the organization, which is we do the various things now, but that was the origination of where Freight 360 kind of came from.
Very cool. It's a big industry, freight, massive industry, but it's very connected, and it's kind of a small industry as well in terms of who you connect with, stay in touch with, and so forth. I've been in the business for 27 years now, and it's just funny to see the people that you see over and over again and you kind of reconnect with and
Yep.
keep in touch with. So I love that story. That's awesome. So I understand you recently surpassed 200 episodes. So can you give us an overview about your show and how it ties into the work that you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and again, a lot of forethought went into what we were going to do with Freight 360. I mean, I think the original premise was that him and I both felt communication was really an issue across the industry. I worked in a large company. He worked in some other large companies, and we really felt like communication and how everybody actually went about doing their business, if everybody really understood each other's place in the industry, we could really all benefit, rising tides lift all boats kind of thing.
Right.
So when we went about it with that premise, so it really started from the educational standpoint of we wanted to put out like correct and ethical information to people in their first, would say 1 to 3 years of the business, how to initiate getting into it, getting your licenses, but really good SOPs that can be applied across the industry that add value to everybody, right? From the shipper through the brokers, whether you're a carrier, whether you're an intermediary, because again, there is a lot of conflict, I think, that exists for lots of other reasons. But at the end of the day, if everybody really does work and care about the other sides within any transaction or in any relationship, everybody benefits and everybody can have longer term relationships, just like you referred to, right? Massive industry, some $700 to $800 billion a year, depending on the estimates. But it's a small world where kind of everybody does kind of get to know each other when you've been in it a while. And it's like and again, I don't want to say it feels like family, but it has kind of the small feel, but with the large opportunities. And that's one of the things that, I really do love about this industry. And of everyone that I've ever worked in my life is the one I've come back to and really want to do probably for the rest of my career.
Right. Absolutely. It's a very connected industry for sure. No doubt about it. And I've done a ton of industrial engineering work during my career, and processes and procedures are so important.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, it can mean the difference between 30 to 50% productivity, depending on how you do things. Right. So that's very, very important.
Huge, as well as losses. I mean, we did an episode this week with, actually, we did it yesterday with the chief marketing officer, Jeff Hopper at DAT, and the topic was on fraud. But one of the big takeaways, and it was a really enlightening conversation just about what's happening, but it really shows, to your point, how procedures, they increase efficiencies, but they also mitigate risk, right?
Right, right.
Risk to your customers, the shippers, to the carriers, what you're paying for when you pay for insurance, what risks you're really mitigating, and what processes you can put in place that are very low cost, honestly, pretty low effort, but if you're consistent with them, have huge impacts on your businesses.
Right. Absolutely. Given your experience in the industry, what would you say are the top 2 or 3 key trends happening in freight in the past, year or so?
I'd say the biggest one is the tail effect of the pandemic, and everybody, is aware of what happened. Supply chain was in the news, the giant bullwhip effect of shutting down all of the manufacturing and all of the supply chain for periods of time all over the globe. We're starting to see that, I think, play out. A lot of the reports showing that inventory levels are getting back to normal. The fear of not having what you need to get to your customers is now starting to normalize. I think that is one of the bigger trends that preceded this year that we're still seeing the effects of. And again, when you see massive disruptions in an industry, you are going to see large opportunities, huge spikes in rates and profitability. We're seeing the tail end of that right now. So massive amounts of people rushed into it to go make the money and to solve problems that we needed solved as an economy and as a globe, right? Just as a society. But now, you're seeing the demand come back. We're in an inflationary environment where most of the governments across the globe are trying to bring in inflation that was caused a lot because of the disruptions in the supply chain. And one of the ways they bring that back in is pulling the money out of the supply, which is the other side of that supply demand, right? In the industry, you've got the number of carriers that are affecting rates, whether they're entering the market or leaving it. They're leaving it now. It seems to be more at the bottom of the market for most analysts. And I think the other side is the amount of freight to be moved within that market, right? And now it doesn't seem to be moving smaller, but it's not necessarily expanding either. I think a lot of the economists are referring to like we're in this Goldilocks phase of the economy. It's like not too hot, not too cold. We're not in a recession, but we're not doing great. But we're kind of in this, middle area. My opinion is that is the trend that is likely to continue through the rest of the year. But on the other side of that is the uptick, right? Our industry is cyclical, just like almost everything else in the economy, right? If it's a free market, it will have retractionary periods or recessions, and it will have expansionary periods. We are on probably the tail end of one of the longest recessionary periods. I would say it probably started around May of last year. And it's likely, again, not just my opinion, but I think a lot of people that study this a lot better than me think that we're likely to see this probably towards the end of this year, probably the beginning of next year, where we're going to start to see the expansion of maybe hopefully the economy as well as our industry on the other end. So I think there's a lot of great opportunities. If you're doing the consistent things to capitalize on this, you can set yourself up, I think, for a great period that is right around the corner. But I think on the other hand, if you're going to sit and dwell on what you can't control, and you're just going to sit and complain that things aren't the way you wish they were, that they were a year and a half ago or 2 years ago, you're your own worst enemy in those scenarios.
Right. There was a massive boom after the pandemic, just crazy amounts of freight and rates were through the roof and so forth. But yeah, I've been in it for 27 years, like I mentioned, and I've seen it go up and down, up and down, up and down.
Yeah.
And
the interesting thing, you've been in it 27 years, right? I think one of the more interesting things for people in it right now is most people in our industry, I mean, let's be honest, tend to be younger, at least the sales folks. They're in their mid-20s usually, where most of these large companies, most of them don't remember a recession in their adult life, right? Like the last one was in 08, 09. I was in banking, you were still in freight. And the one before that you saw, right? In 01, 02 on the backside of the dot-com bubble, right? So, I mean, you've experienced too, most people in our industry, this is the first time they've ever seen an economy retract. And it's like, oh my gosh, what do you mean? Things aren't always expanding. Money's not always free and people aren't always buying more things. And, this is part of just the way economies cycle. And it's just part of the way business runs.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, given everything, and have seen and so forth, what would you say are 2 or 3 keys to success in this world of freight?
I would say one of the biggest keys is, and this is, I think, true in all business, it's consistency of efforts, right? Greatness isn't hitting long shots or hitting home runs or grand slams. It's really putting the bat on the ball, getting on base over and over, right? If you're going to use football as an analogy, you're not throwing Hail Marys every, first down. You're trying to move the ball 2 to 3 yards every play to get a first down to move across the field. If you stay focused on those things, I honestly believe you're almost inevitably going to succeed in our industry. And I think the second more important thing along with that are your expectations. I think one of the biggest reasons people don't succeed is their expectation is that they're going to pick up the phone every day and everybody they're going to call is going to need what they have to offer. And I think if you go in with that expectation, you're setting yourself up for a lot of emotional distress because you're going to be very frustrated and you're going to take this rejection very personally. And the reality is if you look at it more like a marathon and less like a sprint, and you look to the horizon rather than what you did today, you are set up much better for success. And I think the emotional toll that you're going to pay to succeed in anything is going to be a little lighter than when you put that much pressure on yourself.
Right. Absolutely. It's a numbers game, honestly, right?
Absolutely.
If you just look at it objectively like that. So I've been in sales for 20 some odd years of my career. If you just look at it objectively as I need this many touches, I need this many meetings, I need this many proposals,
that's it.
You're going to get no's. It's going to happen. Yeah. And there's nobody I've ever met that is 100% close rate. It's just not going to happen. So you just have to look at it objectively.
I think my two favorite analogies of that are, one, I heard somebody use surfing as an analogy, and he said, you know what? It really shouldn't be called surfing. It should be called paddling, because you paddle like most of an hour every time you're out there, provide a few minutes of a wave. Yeah. And he's like, in sales, it really shouldn't be called sales. It should be called no's, because you're really getting no's and rejections all day to get a few yeses. And that's really where I think, again, back to expectations. If you set that up front and you keep track of your numbers, like you said, once you start closing them, count the no's. Don't count the yeses, because every no is one no closer to a yes. That's and they're inevitable if you stick to it.
I had some sales training, and that's exactly what they said. Every no gets you one step closer to your next yes.
Yep.
So you just got to go through the process. Really, again, it comes down to process. So I totally agree with that. And what are the best ways for people to connect with you, Benjamin?
So you can reach us through our website at freight360.net. There's a contact form that goes to everybody in our organization. There's a handful of us now. We respond to those daily with any questions or concerns about anything in the industry. We've got a pretty big presence on YouTube, so we respond to any questions or comments or anything on that platform. And you can reach out to us directly at info@freight360.net.
Very cool. Awesome. So what would you say as a final word of advice for our friends out there listening or watching today?
I would say I would leave you with the same quote that I kind of end every episode with, which is, whether you believe you can or believe you can't, you're right. And why I've always liked that quote, and I think it's from Henry Ford, is that it all starts with that. The likelihood that you're ever going to convince somebody else to trust you and work with you in your business is you better be damn sure you believe in what you're doing in the first place. Because if you have a doubt about the service you're presenting, the likelihood that the person you're talking to is ever going to want to do business with you is slim to none. So believing in what you're doing, to me, is what precedes all success in almost every aspect of life.
Absolutely. My addition to what you just said, lead with value and verified results as much as you can. Lead with value. I've seen, and I've done a lot of technology sales in my career. A lot of people will lead with features.
Yep.
We cover this lane. We do this. Lead with the value that you offer, and then things will start to really churn, So.
Absolutely. I mean, I would add one thing to that. And I think another key reason for that is when people talk about features, they're thinking about what's important to their product, not important to what their customer needs, right? That's and if you start with what you said, what is valuable to them, now you're at the actual starting point, because the person you're talking to doesn't necessarily care about what's important to you, right?
Right. They don't care what the manufacturer of the trailer was, what kind of tires you use, your maintenance cycles, things like that. They just want to know what's in it for me, really. I mean, that's
exactly.
Comes right down to. So Well, thanks again for coming on with me, Benjamin. It's been a lot of fun talking with you offline and here today. So thanks again for coming on.
It's been an absolute pleasure. It's been great meeting you and being able to do the show with you. And again, heard great things about it, been listening to your show for a while, and everybody else I've talked to in the industry has also had great things to say. So it's been great to be a part of it.
Well, thank you for that. Likewise, I've been following you for quite a while and I love what you're doing. Keep it up. And that's going to do it for this episode of the Trucking Tower Podcast. Thanks for listening or watching, everybody, and we will see you again soon. Take care.